Hey guys, we've been banging away on a little Mazda, getting the green top in there, and as you can see, it's in there, it's running, it's even been on the dyno. But the video has turned into such a monster that we decided to pull the engine build part of the video, create a two-part series on preparing your Barra for boost on the cheap. One of the great things about the Barras is they come with these factory lift points. I've got an old strap here that I'm going to use to lift it up. Yeah, feed the straight through these lift points, which makes lifting it in and out of things very easy. So something important to note, when you're putting an engine stand on a Barra, make sure not to use the lower bolts on the engine because they're actually the sump. So if you're going to pull the sump off like we are, don't bolt your engine stand to that because you're going to have trouble later on. So, crisis avoided. Lower it down. Okay, let's start preparing. So to kick things off, we're going to start by stripping everything off the outside of our engine. Start right here on this O2 sensor. Rolled the dice and won. Didn't snap a single one. There's two schools of thought with removing the intake manifold. One is to do it this way, just undo the bolts, which, you know, obviously you can't use a power tool in there unless you've got a really high-end 90-degree impact. Or you can split the intake manifold. Impact those, pull them off, then impact from the side, which I've done before a few times. I just don't think it's any quicker. I've left these two bolts down the bottom here for last because they are easy to get to. So I can just impact them off at the end. So I just remove these top ones and then just impact the last two off and the manifold's gone. But as you can see, no injector bungs, no injectors, because it was never designed for petrol. Petrol manifolds are obviously a lot more complicated. There she goes. All right, we don't need this little plate. Well, it's on the sump, but I'll take it off anyway. It's in the road. It's everything off this side. Now we get the heavy duty stuff. Rocker cover comes off. Balancer, front timing case, sump, it's all coming off. Head's going to come off as well. Specialised tools are expensive, but necessary sometimes, like this harmonic balancer puller. Job done. So when it comes time to removing the rocker cover, I like to do the cam phases first, because if you release the pressure off the cover, it springs up slightly and makes it very hard to remove the phases. So just pop them out with a screwdriver. More so these seals that cause the trouble rather than the phases themselves. Alright, so the cover is one of the ones that forces downward pressure on them. So get the seals out, that's the easiest way to do it, because if you undo the cover first, these metal rings hook themselves behind that lip and they're nearly impossible to remove without destroying them. With these cam phases, they had some that are just held down or just sort of sit in place, held in by the seal, and then some bolt down to the head. These ones bolt down to the head, as you can see there and there. A little bit annoying, but it's just one of those things. I prefer the later ones. At this point, normally when you're doing the valve springs and head studs and that sort of thing, you would undo the cam phases at the front, pull the cams, pull all these girdles. You got to make sure you keep the girdles in the spaces they're supposed to be. You can't interchange them. If you interchange them, it chews everything up. So normally we would do that, but in this case we're going to pull the whole front cover off. So I'm going to remove the cams and everything, but I probably won't have to undo these parts. I'll just undo the tensioner for the chain, which actually looks to be in really good condition. I'll keep that. I've got to pull the spark plugs. I've just sprayed a bit of WD down there because sometimes you don't know how long it's been since they've had a plug change. So I've pulled spark plugs out and pulled the threads out at the same time occasionally. So something to look out for. But we're going to pull the entire head off and then do a Hermetic gasket on there. Then head studs, springs, oil pump gears, the whole bit. I wonder if someone's comp tested this one, because the spark plugs are coming out very easily. So there we have it, the drive system of the Barra. Got our crank trigger wheel down here, 36-1. Cam phases up here, big long timing chain. So what I'll do is I'll rotate this around to the point where I'm happy and I can set it up easy enough again. And then I will pull timing chain, head, sump, and then oil pump. Sticking the Allen key in there just takes the tension off it, but you can pull it out and just release it and it won't come apart, so it doesn't really matter. Just sit it there. Later on, when we want to reinstall it, we'll just squeeze that in, release that, and hold it in place with the Allen key again. Now that we've relieved the tension, we can just undo the timing chain, lay it off to the side. I'll reset that up later. I mean, we have to pull it all off anyway because we're going to pull the crank trigger off. So I might as well pull that off now, set it aside, and we'll come back to that later. So I've got to undo that bolt because it attaches the guide to the head. I'll undo the cams first and then I can do the head. Okay, so we've got all that loose. I'm just going to start removing my bridges here, the little cam bridges. So I'll just position them over here so we know which way they go on. Come on, baby. So that's for that side. For that side. Alright, and our cams. So just got to remember it all goes back together like that. Good to see that this engine's in pretty good condition inside. It's nice and clean. It's not all varnished up like some of them we've pulled apart. There we have it. One Barra. So I've already pulled the sump, which you've seen us do a million times. We won't need that pickup for this setup. All right, pull our pump off. So crank driven, straight off the snout. Now, most of the time in autos, oil pump gears probably not necessary, but in a car like this, it's going to be revving hard and high and smacking against the limiter. Yeah. In manuals, definitely. Anytime you do a manual Barra, like high horsepower, pump gears, because gear changes and hitting the limiter is what smashes them. Here we go. As simple as that. Alrighty. We'll pull that apart and do ourselves some gears. Now that we've got the engine pulled down to a short block, it is time to look at the cylinder head. We've got it over here on the bench. Normally you would change the valve springs on the engine and use air down the cylinder, and then you have to lock up the engine so it doesn't try and rotate with air down the cylinder. It's a whole complicated process. So it is a lot easier to do it over here on the bench, seeing that we had the head off anyway to do the kinetic gasket. So the valve spring tool is very easy to use. It just sits on the cylinder head, lines up with every row of valves, just use a couple bolts to hold it down. Changing valve springs in a Barra is pretty much mandatory. You can't put any decent boost into them without changing the springs. Now, back when we did the turbo taxi the first time with the NA motor, man, we couldn't feed more than 11 pounds boost into that thing without the valve springs doing very funky things. So, change the valve springs. Always plan on it. They're cheap and they're pretty easy to do. So we've got this very handy tool from Dominator Motorsports, who also supplied our springs. So the springs we're using are their 95-pound springs, which are good to 35 pounds of boost apparently. So ovate wire, all the good stuff. They're so cute. But you can certainly see the difference between stock spring, which you can almost crush by hand, and hard spring. So, Dominator Motorsports. But we'll get these out. The tool allows you to do 4 springs at a time. So we'll just lock our tool down, 4 10mm bolts. Don't have to be locked down hard, just gently tight. Alright, tool is locked in place. Put our caps on each valve spring. Don't have to give it all the load, just enough so you can get the locks out. To get the locks out, use a magnet. Sometimes they can be a bit finicky. There we go. So one. So tools set up so you can do 4 at a time. So just be careful to not mix your locks up. Uncompress the springs. So just remove our retainer. Keep that with our locks. Pull the spring. Put that aside. Grab a new spring. Slide it over. Retainer back on the top. Getting the locks out is easy with a magnet, but getting them back in, it's a little bit trickier. A little bit of grease on the tip of a screwdriver, a non-magnetic screwdriver, will make this job a lot easier. Sitting in place. Undo it. Another one bites the dust. So now that we've done the valve springs, it's time to do the oil pump gears. Now this is a Barra oil pump. It's basically crank driven, so crank snout goes through the center, it turns the pump, pumps oil. Now the problem is that the actual gears themselves are just powdered metal. So if you lean on them too hard, like hit the limiter, slamming changes in the shifts and that sort of thing, especially with manuals, dumping the clutch, you will fracture these gears. So in a high horsepower application like ours, where we may be bouncing off the limiter occasionally, we're going to err on the side of caution and change the pump gears. So we've got these gears from Dominator. So there's a set of billet gears and a backing plate to suit. So what we're going to have to do is remove this backing plate and replace the gears and put our new backing plate on. We'll also put grease and stuff in there. Now to do that, these screws are all held on quite tightly. So we're going to have to lock it up in the vise, but very gently, because this is only just cast alloy. So we'll lock it up in the vise, just carefully, being sure to stay away from the machine surfaces. So we'll just lock her up. I might even go a bit shallower than that. Okay, now these things are in tight. So I've got a little 1/4 inch drive ratchet with a screwdriver attachment, Phillips head. Now I think I've already, have I done that one? Yeah, no, not yet. So, man, and the screws are soft too, that's the problem. That's another problem. So you got to kind of get right in there. Oh. That one's loose. Now where'd the thing go? Yeah, once you crack them, they're fine, but you just got to get them to crack. All right, just got to give it some downward pressure, and then, so that one's loose. That one's loose. That one's loose. That one is not. One's being a bit painful. So those three are causing problems. So now that we've totally ballsed that up, I'm going to have to drill out the heads of these screws. Apparently you only get one good shot at them, and if you stuff that up, you're up to this. So we've got 5 of the 8 undone. 3 are going to be problems. So we will drill them out and see where we go from there. Alright, now I'll just undo the rest of these and we'll see how we can go about getting the rest out. So when it's time to put these back in, we're actually going to replace them with these Allen key head ones that I've got from Max Performance. So they should be a lot more reliable. Not that we should have to remove them at all, but certainly make life easier if they'd done that in the first place at Ford. Okay, this is going to be fun. And there's our oil pump gears, so you can see how they sit in the pump. Pretty simple arrangement, just keeps pushing the oil around. Now there's a pressure valve there, and basically, yeah, just comes in via the pickup here, and then just gets chased around until it goes out and into the engine through that hole there. So obviously we'll have to give this a nice good washout. So to complete the process, I've borrowed a screw extractor set from the boys at Max Performance, and it comes with this very funky left-handed drill bit. That's right. So we have to run the drill in reverse, which obviously we can't do with the good old drill press. So we're going to have to do this by hand. Now they do tell me that there is a chance that they will actually self-extract just with the drill bit. Oh, look at that. Look at that, it's grabbed it straight away and wound it straight out. How good is that? So we're just going to remove this pressure relief spring. So now we have a completely bare oil pump housing. Take it over the parts washer, give it a clean out, then we can start the reassembly process. Another important thing is to never blow compressed air onto the skin, even as a joke, not to your mates, not to yourself. Can cause air embolisms, I'll try and say that correctly, and kill you. It has happened to apprentices and stuff in the past where people have thought it was funny to, you know, hit them with some compressed air and stuff. It's not a joke. So, anyway, housing's sparkling clean. So I reckon we will start putting that back together. So here we have our pump gears from Dominator Motorsports, of course. Just open the packet up. Now these are made out of billet steel, CNC machined and isotropic polished. So we'll take them fresh out of the packet and straight into our housing. Much stronger than our powdered metal gears as standard. These fracture. These gears much stronger, and then when you add the backing plate to the back, so this is a billet aluminium backing plate, and it will go there like so, and it will help reduce cavitation rather than this very thin piece of cast aluminium that they use from the factory. So apply a nice coating of grease to the back of the gears. And just in there a little bit as well, so when it circles around it will suck the oil up cleanly from startup. Got our backing plate there, it will go like so. Let's get this onto our engine.